Sometimes I fall into this mistaken thinking that it would be way easier for me and all of us if our world was black and white. If it was either right or wrong. If we could clearly define the boundaries about this is okay and that's not. This person is in the group and that person is out. This circumstance is clearly yes or no. But I know and you know that's simply not how the world works. Like, not in any way, shape, or form. Every place we look, we realize that we live in a spectrum. Spectrums of color, and spectrums of heights, and spectrums of intelligence, and spectrums of political leanings, and spectrums of gender identities. All of these things are spectrums. We live in a very pluralistic world. And as a cis white man, sometimes I've just got to say thank you. Because it'd be awfully easy for me to sit in the privilege and the power that I have just because of where and who I was born. And it'd be easier for me to say everything I have is right. Everything everybody else has is wrong. So I preached a sermon on that quite recently. It was part of our local Pride celebration. I want to share that sermon with you. Here it is.
We're going to read from Acts 10 today, Acts 10, 1 to 35, which at first blush seems like a rather bizarre scripture for a pride and inclusion service. But if you'll stick with me here, you'll see that it fits. Because it's a story about a vision about weird animals. We'll just leave it at that. And it needs a little bit of sort of some context. It always helps for us to dig in a little bit. So just before we jump into scripture, we're going to be hearing lots about Peter. Now, this is the same Simon Peter who spent time with Jesus, the same Simon Peter who I often find I really identify with Simon Peter because he generally will run his mouth before he engages his brain. And that feels a little bit like me someday. So I really do quite enjoy Simon Peter for the very humanness that he is. Now, this is a little later in his ministry, but what we see here is in this story, Peter grew up in this environment of very deep Jewish tradition. And he was a bit of a Jewish traditionalist. There were people you did spend time with, as in your family and your friends and the people that you knew from your religion. And there were people you didn't spend time with, those dirty, dirty Gentiles. Now, I say that jokingly because, of course, we are all Gentiles and it's fun to make fun of ourselves. But these were clear boundaries. This was a societal binary. And in the story we're about to bump into, Peter is called to break down that binary in his own life, in his own thinking. Acts 10, we're going to read 1 to 35. In Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of the Italian cohort, as it was called, clearly a Gentile. He was a devout man who feared God with all his household. He gave alms generously to the people and prayed constantly to God. One afternoon at about 3 o'clock, he had a vision in which he clearly saw an angel of God coming into him and saying, "Cornelius." And he stared at him in terror and said, "What is it, Lord?" He answered, "Your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa for a certain Simon who is called Peter. He is lodging with Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside." When the angel who spoke to him had left, he called two of his slaves and a devout soldier from the ranks of those who served him, and after telling them everything, he sent them to Joppa. About noon the next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat. And while it was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw the heaven open, and something like a large sheet coming down, being lowered to the ground by its four corners. In it were all kinds of four-footed creatures and reptiles and birds of the air. And then he heard a voice saying, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is profane or unclean." I want to pause just for a little moment there. We're going to take just a little tangent off to the side, but I think it's an especially appropriate tangent today. So the rules that he's talking about, I've never eaten anything that's profane, I've never eaten anything that's unclean, those rules, we still have them. We know why that was important to him. They're pretty much all the book of Leviticus. All sorts of rules, all sorts of laws about things that you should or should not do. But some of you here have also heard other parts of the book of Leviticus, I'm sure. I'm sure some of you have heard parts of the book of Leviticus used as a weapon against you or against people you love. I want to jump into that because this is an almost laughable thing that we can see how messy it is when we try to use the Bible as a weapon. So Leviticus 18:22, lots of you are probably familiar with this. It says something along the lines of, "A man shall not lie down with another man as he would lie down with a woman. It is an abomination." And that last part is critically important because you know what else Leviticus says is an abomination that Peter knew very, very well and he was responding to? Things that say all of the fish in the sea that have scales and have fins, you can eat them. But anything that does not have scales and does not have fins, you shall not eat it. So anytime you encounter somebody who's willing to protest a pride parade, but is not willing to protest Red Lobster, they're picking and choosing the parts of the Bible that they will use to instruct other people. That's important because Peter is sitting in this knowledge of knowing that he was told clearly by his traditions, by the history, by the people that he grew up with. They told him clearly, there is a list of stuff that you're not supposed to eat. And now here he is in this vision. And the voice from heaven is inviting him to get up and kill and eat. If we spend a little more moment in Leviticus, we also learn that you're not even supposed to kill it yourself. That's the job of a priest. It's an event. It's a sacrifice where you kill the things and then you eat them as a big barbecue, a family time together. This was telling him to break all the rules they had grown up with. It needed to be a big moment for Peter to really understand what was going on. The voice said to him again a second time, "What God has made clean, you must not call profane." This happened 3 times, and then the thing was suddenly taken up to heaven. Now, Peter was greatly puzzled by what to make of the vision that he had seen. And then suddenly the men sent by Cornelius appeared. They were asking for Simon's house and were standing by the gate. They called out to ask whether Simon, who was called Peter, was staying there. And while Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Look, 3 men are searching for you. Now get up, go down, and go with them without hesitation, for I have sent them." Sometimes it takes something catastrophic to push us away from the things that we hold so firm in our lives. There's a statement I read recently from Father Richard Rohr he said, "It takes either great suffering or great love to move us away from the things we hold the deepest." And it was in great love that Peter saw this vision. It probably would have been easier for him to go with some Gentiles than to eat the things he had been taught never to eat. So Peter went down to the men and said, "I am the one you are looking for. What is the reason for your coming?" They answered, "Cornelius, a centurion, an upright and God-fearing man, is well spoken of by the whole Jewish nation, was directed by a holy angel to send for you to come to his house and hear what you have to say." So Peter invited them in and gave them lodging. Something else you never did for Gentiles. The next day he got up and went with them. And some of the believers from Joppa accompanied them. Following day they came to Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and called together his relatives and his close friends. On Peter's arrival, Cornelius met him and falling at his feet worshipped him. But Peter made him get up, saying, "Stand up, I am only a mortal." And as he talked with him, he went in and found many had assembled. And he said to them, "You yourself know that it's unlawful for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile, but God has shown me that I should not call anyone profane or unclean. So when I was sent for, I came without objection. Now, may I ask why you sent for me?" Cornelius replied, 4 days ago at this very hour at 3:00, I was praying in my house, and suddenly a man in dazzling clothes stood before me. He said, "Cornelius, your prayers have been heard. Your alms have been remembered before God. Send therefore to Joppa and ask for Simon, who is called Peter. He is staying in the home of Simon, a tanner by the sea. Therefore I sent for you immediately, and you have been kind enough to come. So now all of us are here in the presence of God to listen to all that the Lord has commanded you to say." Then Peter began to speak to them. "I truly understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right and is acceptable to him." Now, Peter's sermon continues, and I invite you at some point, continue reading it. It is absolutely beautiful. And knowing the context, knowing that this was a moment that even just days before, Peter would have definitely resisted, probably feared. If we think about the ways that we automatically assume things about people who are not us, people who are other, and that other can look like just about anything. Pick an ism, and there's an other for it, right? Ageism, racism, all of the things around bigotry, anything that is built into us, those preconceived notions, those pre-rational ideas we have that are baked into us by our society, by our families of origin, by our teaching, by our religion, by everything that we have learned since we were this big to however big we are now. Other is scary. Other is to be resisted. Other is to be avoided. And every time we do that, we fit easily into saying us and them. There are only two options. It's a binary. Either you're one of us or you're one of them. Which brings me to the word here. I personally want to say thank you. I hope that I'm saying this on behalf of other cis white males, but I am saying this for me. And I am saying thank you to every other. For without the others, it would be so easy for me to sit within the binaries that seem so comfortable, that seem so easy, that engage all of those things that just, like they're built in and they're who we are. They're those precognitive biases that sit with us, that inform us before we even start logically thinking. But the beautiful thing is that as soon as you meet one other, as soon as you get to know one person who breaks down that barrier for you, then it makes it possible that there might be others. It makes it possible that we might actually all be others. And so I say thank you. Here's the beautiful thing that has happened in my life as I have gotten to know more others. I want to talk specifically about people who deal in non-binaries of any sort, whether that be the color of skin or even the color of hair or the color of eyes or heights or gender identities or the people they choose to associate with or the clothing that they wear. Anybody who breaks the model that says it's either this or that. Anybody who says this is a spectrum and it's beautiful. Because for me personally, and I know for many folks who I've spoken with, it helps us each see that we too have spectrums within us. This Sunday that we call Pride, I absolutely love that we do this here, and I am both thrilled and terrified that I am invited to stand here and talk about this, because I am not able to speak about my experience as a member of the LGBT community, and so I will not. And instead, what I want to do is say thank you. Because without seeing others, I could be quite easily trapped into assuming that my life also is binary. But it turns out, once I give myself a little bit of freedom to see that, then I realize that I'm much more free to see myself in healthier ways as well. I know I'm a guy. I identify as male. There's never a time in my life where I had to pick or choose that. That's who I am. That being said, there are lots of models on TV or in media or in books that are describing males who are very, very, very different from me. And without models of people who take the binaries and kick them out the door and say, no, 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 this is not us and them, this is everything and all the in-between bits as well, that lets me be a much more healthy and free to live my life sort of guy than somebody who gets trapped feeling, if I don't look or behave like those guys. You can hear it right in there. It's already us and them, right? Me versus them. If I don't behave like those guys, then I'm less of a man. I'm going to admit something to you. It's devastating. I'm not a big fan of beer. Which means that every single beer commercial that has manly men doing manly men things, I'm like, oh, I'm not that guy. But the beautiful thing is that every single non-binary person in my life who has spent their entire lives fighting those prejudices, seeing that there are no representations of themselves in media, and standing up and saying, but that's okay because I'm still me. Every one of those people who do that bravely, who do that strongly, sometimes do it crying in silence because they don't feel seen and don't feel known. But every one of those people gives each and every one of us the courage to be just who we are. Turns out there are a few more ways that I identify with Peter. Not just because he tends to run his mouth before he turns his brain on. Not just because he tends to say things that seem like what everybody is thinking, but very often in the Gospels, about as soon as he says something, then Jesus points out how he completely missed the point. But I also realize that there are many ways that I have kind of accidentally got stuck or trapped in, whether it's the tradition or the family, or the schooling, or the religion, or whatever it is that I grew up with. I've got stuck there. I've been trapped there. So I say thank you to all the people who, like Peter, all the people who have bothered to say, I'm not quite what people expect of me. I'm the alligator in a bluebird's nest. To every single one of those people, I say thank you. The best part of that is that although today is a celebration of pride, that thank you goes to every human ever who has bothered to say, you will not put me in a pigeonhole. You will not clearly define my boundaries for me and tell me who I have to be. And the other beautiful part about that is each and every one of us, whether we have had to struggle for our identity or whether it has been easy sailing, Every one of us knows somebody who we look to and say, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to communities who will stand up and be counted even if it's dangerous. Thank you to people who have heard their entire lives that they aren't right, or they aren't built the same way, or they don't fit, and they say, okay, you can no longer hurt me that way. Thank you to people who don't look the same as the others in their community and say proudly, and I am me. Not every one of us has the benefit of a sheet full of bizarre animals lowered from the heavens to wake us up and lead us in a new direction, guide us to willingly say, I will sit and I will eat with the Gentiles who I have been taught to hate. But every one of us has a person in our lives who's doing that same job. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining today. If this is your first time or you've been here forever, I just want you to know how much I love you and appreciate you. And I want you to know that you are some of the people who help me remember how plural this world is. Even as I look at the people I know best, who mostly look and speak and think very similar ways to me, I realize there's a huge spectrum even within them. And you help me recognize how beautiful and broad and creative and plural this world is. So thank you. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. I love you all. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.